Hello, everyone. Welcome to Social Justice Insights Kenya. I'm Maria, the founder of this platform, where I create advocacy content to educate and eradicate harmful mindsets and effect social change. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about parental violence and its long lasting effects on children, such as mental health problems. Today on the podcast is Yovin. Yovin is a Fijian lawyer and achieving scholar pursuing a Master's of Laws with a specialization in gender at SOAS University of London. With a strong background in constitution and human rights litigation, Yovin has worked extensively on cases involving vulnerable groups, including survivors of domestic violence and children in state custody. As part of the Attorney General's chambers in Fiji, he contributed to state reporting under SEDA CRPD conventions and participated in regional consultations on law reform. His academic and professional work interrogates the deep intersection between legal systems, gender-based violence, and societal norms, particularly how they affect the LGBTQIA individuals and children. So why are we talking about parental violence today? Nelson Mandela once wrote, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." So today I urge you to think about, how does your society treat its children? Yuvin, welcome to the podcast. So I'm so excited to have you here. Yovin is a good friend of mine, and we're on the tuning scholarship together. So it's truly a great pleasure. Yeah. So to start us off, what is parental violence?
Define parental violence as violence inflicted by your primary caregiver, and in most cases, it's parents. It's inflicted to children and can have really long-lasting impacts on children's well-being and development. There are very many types of parental violence. We know of the common ones like physical violence or sexual violence. I would say parental violence is a spectrum. It's violence that is inflicted by the primary caregiver, like parents, that have long-lasting impact on a child's development and well-being.
It's true. We have seen this being reported by UNICEF, WHO. 2 in 3 children worldwide regularly face violence. And this is mentally, psychologically, denial of food, for example. It comes in very many different forms. And this is why we have laws such as the United Nations Convention for the Rights of Children. And in Kenya, we do have the Children's Act, which makes it illegal. What do you have in Fiji that makes parent violence?
We don't have a standalone act, but there's Family Law Act as well as Crimes Act that extensively cover violence against children. Yeah, and Fiji has ratified the 4 conventions, one of them being the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC. So, and we have ratified the optional protocols as well.
Very true. But it's very difficult with the social norms and the various dynamics that happen in the household, especially in Kenya we have dynamics, and I'm sure in Fiji you have your own dynamics in the household.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you, in what forms does this parental violence manifest in Fiji household?
As a lawyer, I mean, I have, as you mentioned earlier, I've represented children in court as a child representative, during like a custody battle or a child abuse matter. So I've done a few of those cases, and this is when I was working for the Fiji government, not private practice. So we represent the children. Parents have separate lawyers. Very many times I've seen like a recurring theme in children, where I've read counseling reports. I've also spoken to the children, and it's usually, you said how it manifests, right? So like it's usually neglect. See, I just want to start off by saying the physical aspect, like the physical violence, is the common one, right? That's more tangible, it's more visible. You can hear it when a child is crying.
Children being beaten.
You can see the marks on their bodies. But in nowadays, I think it has moved past that. And while it is still there, and I'm not negating that it's not, I'm not negating its existence. I'm saying that it has evolved to things like psychological violence, mental violence, emotional violence. A lot of times, I've like a recurring thing that I've seen is parents going through a divorce, right? Let's say separation, which is when these matters are come before the family court, and children are thrown into that whirlwind, into that uh, like that murky pool where they are being pulled from both ends. They are privy to their parents' arguments. Parents try to elicit information from the children about the other parent, about their new partners. Some have gone to the extent of making a child falsely accuse the other parents' partners of like physical violence or sexual violence. And when like these issues are further discussed with the child in counseling session, like you find out that they've been coerced into doing these things. So the parents at that point do not realize the long lasting mental and emotional aspects of these things, of inflicting these things on a child. So it's these sort of abuse. It's not really that much physical that I've seen. It's more psychological. It's more mental, emotional.
That's important because we just assume parental violence is someone a child being beaten, and it's way worse than that for sure. And so,
And so, if I may
yeah,
add, psychological violence, it's like insidious. It's gradual. It's not really.
yeah,
You will not. Most often than not, you cannot really put a finger on it, and the child definitely does not know if they are being violated against or they are being abused.
yeah,
Whereas physical violence, I think it has been spoken about so much now. The child most often than not, the child will know, okay, no, this is wrong. You can't touch me. It's against the law for you to touch me. But these sort of violence, you can't really quantify it.
Okay, well, you brought up something interesting that I want to ask. Then, do you think it's important for children to know their rights, and how is the best way they can know? Because even in school, 'cause persons of trust include teachers. Oh my God! So how can they?
Actually, I very much agree with you. I was just about to say that you can't really talk about parental violence at home because that's where, most often than not, that's where it's being inflicted. A and B, I think in communities like Fijian communities, and I'm assuming Kenyan communities as well, we are taught to not talk back to the elders. And whatever, there's this notion that I completely detest that has been passed down for years where children are told that your parents are always right, and no matter what they do, you must listen to your parents, never talk back. And as a child growing up in a Fijian community, I was told never to even raise an objection to their opinions, no matter how wrong they may have been. So I think school is like apart from the home, school is primarily where the where children spend most time at. So obviously these things should be incorporated in like part of a school curriculum, like we have moral values or like physical education. I think things like mental well-being, acceptance, and violence of all sorts, like parental included, emotional violence, it should be a part of the school curriculum, so we have children who are aware when they are being violated, when they are being abused. Because otherwise, where would a child go to um, access this sort of information? They only have two avenues, home and school. One is clearly not where they can access this information. So that leaves school. So I think a lot more awareness needs to be created in schools about these things. Like, yeah, now sexual violence has been covered so much. I think schools actively talk about it. There are like campaigns. They have weeks on sexual violence, drug abuse, substance abuse, all of that. I think this should make its way. Parental violence and other forms of violence should make its way.
That's true. I absolutely agree. I mean, we talk about children and having rights, but they don't know they have rights. It's up to the adults to ensure that their rights are actually enforced and protected.
Exactly.
So I think that's very important. But as we now talk about parental violence, what are some signs as an outsider that I can spot a child who's suffering parental violence? Because I think when you're with family or like among friends, you look at children and some are just quiet and you're just like, oh, they're just quiet. But it could be something deeper. Yeah.
I'm not an expert, but I've been through my fair share of issues with my parents, which is why I think I feel the need to voice these things out. because I would not want anyone else, especially children, to suffer these things when it's not their fault. So I think, yeah, while a lot of these things like being reserved or reticent can be personality traits, I think there are some obvious signs. Like some children grow up to be extreme people pleasers. I, for one, am that right now, you know, or they are hyper vigilant. They become too anxious. They flinch at like every bang on the door, or every time like the door shuts really loudly, or every footstep. Insomnia, maybe like attention disorders as well. Generally in schools, I remember when my parents, I'd have like really volatile situation at home. In school, I would be completely spacey. I would not be able to concentrate. And if I remember once a teacher like banged my table, and I was in a completely different world. I think I was focusing on the fight my parents had the evening before, the night before, and I just got completely startled. Some children also um, go very silent, or some children maybe talk too much to, I don't know, overcompensate for what, or sort of hide or conceal what's going inside, or not sure. If I can give a personal example, I think thanks. So like I noticed my ever since I was really young, I was part to almost every fight of my parents. I've seen everything. The ugly alcohol fueled yelling matches, the name calling, the slurs, physical violence. I've seen all of it, like all of it. Because my parents married really young. They were not educated. Not formal literacy. I mean, they were not educated about these things, right? So um, they got married really young, had me really young. By the time they decided they did not like each other and were not compatible, they had me. So they had no choice. So I've grown up in a household which was really volatile, where there was, as I mentioned, all of these things, right? And after major fights, what would happen would, what would follow would be, weeks of silence, like deafening silence, them not talking to each other.
Weaponizing silence.
Exactly. And because of that, I developed this tendency because I was a child and I was the oldest child. So I did not know what to do. And in my head at that time, I think I sort of developed this mechanism that I need to break that silence. So I just like make menial conversation, just sort of anything. And even today, I get so awkward with awkward silences. I can't sit through awkward silence. Like even in my friend circle, if there's like awkward silence, I will need to say something completely random, completely banal, like the weather, or make a joke of any kind, but just to break the silence. I don't have noticed that pattern, but I'm working on it. But I can definitely attribute it to my uh, yeah upbringing, or like their
That's totally relatable, especially the whole thing of recognizing silence. And I think also because you're a child, you're very impressionable. So the important thing is working on it and recognizing. So I'm really proud of you. You know that? Yeah. Um, and so you've talked about some of these effects on children, long-term effects. You've talked about some of them, like people pleasing. There's some that you've seen that carry forward into the community and development. Do some become criminals? Do some maybe find it difficult to integrate to normal society? Or is it just more personal mental health issues?
Because of the cases that I was privy to, I've seen a lot of these things happen. Like there are social issues rise because of these things. I've seen teenage girls from broken families because they do not have their parents, and if a new parent comes in, then they have a fraught relationship with them as well, and they don't feel loved, they don't feel that they belong, and their parents are focusing at that point, they would be focusing on their respective lives, right? So they feel neglected, and because of these things they succumb to online violence, teenage pregnancy, because they seek that validation, they seek that love from the outside world. And that leads to, like, I've seen like teenage pregnancy, like minors engaging in sexual activities with people, with adult, mostly girls with adult men, um, who they've met on the internet, because they, albeit superficial, they provide them with that sort of validation, and with that sort of security that they didn't, or they don't get at home, which they need. So that's what happens, like I've seen so many of my like friends also who've grow who grew up in broken families attract really toxic partners, really volatile relationships in their lives as adults. The, when we are at impressionable formative, like our formative years, we're at a really impressionable age, and we right from the get-go, as soon as we gain some sort of sense of the world and our surroundings, right from then, that all we see is violence and people pulling each other down and just murkiness and negativity between a couple, it's imprinted in your brain, it's etched into your memory, and that's how you sort of view relationships as, and that's what you attract.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then perpetuating like the cycle, because like now the violence becomes comfortable.
it's
So when
not
you find peace, you feel like you struggle.
absolutely.
Yeah, you wanted to give a
No, yeah, but like, yeah, literally what I was about to say. Yeah, like
Yeah.
you think that it's so normal and it's comforting. Okay, I think my first adult relationship when I was 25, and the example that I was giving of like young girls seeking validation outside and all of that. So I remember it was we were both young. I was 25, the other person was 21, and whatever. But I remember there's this one thing that happened. So it was very, very toxic, really volatile, very push and pull, like from both ends, right? But I remember because I like sort of went through like cheating in that relationship as well. Like I was cheated on and stuff. That's fine. But any self-respecting, in hindsight, any self-respecting adult would have walked out of that relationship. My friends used to tell me, you please walk out of that relationship because cheating is a non-negotiable. It's inexcusable. It really is. And now I would never tolerate it. But at that point, because that person was giving me all that my mother never gave me, like literally was healing my mother wound and my inner child. I refused to let that person go. And literally, I told my friends that what I seek right now in a relationship is predominantly that emotional satisfaction, that emotional support, which I might not get because that person was just hitting that point, like of that like mommy
you
wound.
felt like I'll never find a person
I'll
like this
never
again. They cheated on me once, it's okay.
You
We'll get over it.
exactly.
Oh, no.
I was like, you make me a doormat, I'll be fine. Just to further elaborate on that example. So when I was a child, like my mom used to isolate me. Like whenever if I threw a tantrum, or what children do, right? I think I envision now mothers would like go and hug and try to pacify their children, right? My mother chose the complete opposite of that. So she saw a solution to that would maybe to isolate me. So when I got into that relationship, I remember after one of our first fights, I think I threatened to walk away from the relationship, and that person literally just begged me not to go, and that became like it gave me such a high that I started chasing it. So every single fight we'd had, my reaction to the fight would be so like elaborate, so pronounced that I'd just like threaten to leave only because I'd want that person to chase after me.
Because it gives you that sense of power that you didn't have.
And that satisfaction, it healed my inner child. Like that was the mother word, absolutely. But I think in my case specifically, the good thing was I did a few modules of psychology in my undergrad, and I was always fascinated by this idea of human psychology, the whole concept. So I did a lot of active reading about these things. So I was very aware of what I was doing, but it was feeling like that feeling of being satisfied emotionally was so intense and so powerful, and it was so good. And I think that person healed that part of me because I'm not like that anymore. Yes.
Wow.
That's a rather long answer.
You heard it here first. Parental violence affects you to the end. So, oh my goodness. Well, I think we've talked about how people who are affected by violence, parental violence, interact with the community, but how do they interact with the justice system now? Um, I think you've talked about domestic violence, but is there other ways, like criminal behavior, for example? Or is it just like a bad assumption that we see in movies?
Well, to be honest, in my country, like as a practicing lawyer, I have noticed that the children like who get like who face this sort of like social, see law more as punitive than protective. And also, a lot of these times, it's like the young criminals and the juvenile offenders are from these like sort of broken families and these sort of communities. Even some of them might not have been from broken families, but sort of communities where they have seen. Again, a study has not been done, but this is my observation of it. Like where they've seen like parents being volatile to each other and to them, like especially domestic violence cases. Like I've seen young couples end up in court seeking a DVRO, domestic violence restraining order, because someone has hit the other person, and or someone has thrown a shoe at the other person, or someone has literally, held the other person at like like a knife to the other person's neck. And when I was in private practice, I think I was defending someone, and then that person mentioned something along the lines women should just be okay with this, because my mom did never complain to the police. So it's these things when they become exposed to their parents' murkiness and this volatile relationship, the friction in their relationship, is when I think this gets ingrained in their memories. So.
In Kenya, we have these children's books that basically teach us moral behavior. We have a lot of books that teach us that, but it doesn't teach the fact that children also need to learn about parental violence. I think we need some books about that, like for little children to understand that sometimes I can get angry as a parent, and it wouldn't be your fault; it will be my fault.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think Maria, just alluding to my earlier point, I think in most cultures we are taught to just respect our parents no matter what, not oppose whatever they're doing. And I respect parental values and cultural values, but it's not always the case. There are some really horrible examples of, a lot of the sexual violence inflicted to children are usually by people that they know. And so it's not really, I think there should be a shift in that notion, and we should try to change it in today's day, especially in 2025.
In 2025, we cannot be abusing children, surely. And so, how can we as a community work better to break the cycle? Should it be law enforcement or something more than law enforcement that can change this?
I think definitions of violence, in countries can be amended, and all of these factors that we spoke about, psychological, emotional violence, mental violence, should be incorporated in the legal definition of violence. I think CRC is very open about and also I think a lot of survivor stories needs to be shared. I think that's very important. So people are aware, like campaigns would be really good for children to be aware if they are being abused. Like you can't violate what doesn't exist, right? So if you don't know what is wrong, you can't call people out for that. You can't say you violated my right if I don't even know I have that right. And of course, I think like on television, it's very important, to show these sort of things. Maybe campaign, media representation, of course, and schools. I think would be a very good place to start inculcating children's minds about parental violence and other forms of violence, and how and who they can report to or share with.
Yeah. And almost 80% of our lives in school. Look at us at our ages, we're still in school.
Still in school, never ends.
Yeah, and we're always in school, hardly at home. So I think school is where it should start for sure. And so to conclude, I want to hear what you would like to say about anyone who's concerned about the behavior of a child in their community, or they're struggling with their own behavior being abusive.
As a concluding thought, I would just like to say, I would like to urge young people, my plea to them would be to not have children early on, and not have children until and unless you know who you are and you know your partner really well. And why I'm saying this is because, see, I am a living proof of two people marrying really early, falling in love really early, and then falling out of love really early. And again, I've seen this recurring theme in broken marriages. Like young lovers get married, have children. I have literally had few friends who once we sat down to share stories, and it was like the exact same story. So I'm pretty sure this runs across the board in societies. See, I try to be very solution oriented. So I tell all my young cousins and friends, you do whatever you want with your life. No one can stop you, because today's generation, they're so strong-willed, right? So you can marry whoever you want. If you want to marry outside of your caste, race, whatever you want, that's okay. It's your life. You should do what you really want. Study, not study, start a business, be a TikToker. It's all good. It's on you. It's your life and what you make of it. That truly matters. But just not have children. Like, I urge that to everyone, because, and I'm not against the institution of parenthood and family, but I say this because when I was growing up, and since as early as I can remember, there were a lot of times where I wish that I wasn't born. Like, even today, like presently, I think a few months ago, someone just randomly asked me, a friend of mine, like, if what we were having a heart-to-heart conversation, and a friend of mine asked me, what would be one advice you would give your parents if you could go back in time? I would tell them not to have children. There were a lot of times where, like, I felt that they should have just aborted me, because I would not wish what I went through on my worst enemy, and I don't think any child deserves that. So if so, and I grew up carrying so much of their burden, becoming the third parent. Like, I was parenting them on things they should have been parenting me about, literally. So, and I had a younger sibling, so that was another added responsibility. So I grew up way earlier than I was supposed to, and I developed these things. Like, I have anxiety, yeah, like insomnia, so many of these things, and it has taken therapy and healing, but it's a work in progress. It's gradual. It's not linear, right? So my plea to everyone would be, like, while on paper love sounds really good, having a family sounds really good, starting early sounds really good, and all of it, you romanticize and fetishize the idea of, like, I'm having a baby with my lover or my boyfriend or my girlfriend, but just sit on it, especially in today's day and age, because I've seen a hell lot of like a plethora of negative examples of early parenthood, and how children are the collateral damage, and you don't want to bring a child into this world and have them suffer because of you, because you bring a child into this world. They didn't ask to come into this world, so it's your responsibility to see through that they have a good childhood, that they have a good life. And if you cannot for 1 second provide that for them, just don't bring them into this world. Like, that's my plea to everyone, all the young people watching.
Wow. I don't think I need to say anymore. Wow, Yovin, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, bearing your soul to us. I truly appreciate it. And children who experience or witness violence at home are not passive observers. They're actually victims. And I think we should take this more seriously in our society, in Fiji, in Kenya, wherever you are in the world, children matter. And so if you know anyone who is suffering from parental abuse by a parent or a caregiver, or any person who's in charge of them, please look out for legal resources in your respective countries. If you're a follower of Social Justice Insights Kenya, the Kenyan resources were going to be in my highlights on Instagram. So check that out. And so thank you for tuning in to Social Justice Insights Kenya. Once again, thank you, Yovin. Do you want to be followed on social media, or do you just...
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. It's your Instagram.
So follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube at Social Justice Insights Kenya. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered.